She was one of Van Buren, Arkansas's most prominent citizens, beaten to death inside her own home. Shortly after the murder, authorities set their sights on one suspect, the woman's only son, Sam Hugh Park.
The police stopped the investigation when they came to Sam, and they came to Sam within minutes of discovering the body.
But before investigators could dig up enough evidence to get an arrest warrant, Sam took himself out of the equation.
Sam was in the hospital dying of liver failure.
Just drinking too much over too long of a period of time.
It hadn't even been 2 years since his mother's brutal murder when Sam Hugh died from the effects of alcoholism. He was just 40 years old. To many in town, his passing closed the case on Ruey Ann's murder. Sam was guilty, and he had just executed his own death sentence.
Sam was a suspect until he died. Even after he died, it was still certain he committed the crime.
But nearly 3 hours away in the town of Cabot, Sam's adopted sister Linda was positive her brother had nothing to do with it, even though she had barely seen him since the murder. The fact was, her mom's death hadn't been the only trauma she was dealing with.
She had found out her husband was having an affair. She was very, very sad.
But before she could confront him, she got pregnant with his fourth child. Linda stuck it out in silence, never letting on what she knew, which she says made it all the harder when shortly after her brother's death, Howard decided to leave her for the other woman.
They got a divorce, and she got the 2 little boys, and he took the 2 big boys.
Howard also got their house and most of their other assets. Linda initially agreed to the arrangement, but when she got word that Howard had bought his new girl an expensive engagement ring, something snapped inside the normally meek woman.
One time, she came up here for a visit, and she came to our house, and that's when her attitude changed, and she got mad, and she wanted all the boys and wasn't gonna just take whatever Howard gave her. She was going to fight for that.
Howard got the message and arranged a private meeting with the newly transformed Linda. Just a few hours after that meeting, the murder of Ruey Ann Park was no longer unsolved.
My wife Linda and I had returned on a trip, I think from a vacation, and just pulled into a store here in Van Buren.
And right in front of us was the box where you come buy a newspaper, and there was Linda's picture on the cover of the paper.
Linda Martin, a woman many people in Van Buren had forgotten even existed, was under arrest for the vicious bludgeoning of her own mother.
We were shocked, absolutely shocked to hear that Linda had done it.
So just how did authorities unravel one of the biggest murder mysteries their small town had ever seen?
We get a phone call one night from an attorney, and he said, "I have her on tape admitting killing this woman."
That attorney was Linda's husband, Howard. And as it turns out, before arranging that meeting with his ex, he had arranged a deal with Van Buren police to have his own office wired. Linda had left Howard's office emotionally drained, but unaware her secret was out, until she got the knock on her door later that night.
We sent the police there, and they took a statement from her, and she fully confessed.
She had no choice. In the police cruiser on the way back to Van Buren, officers played Linda the tape of her meeting with Howard, which included passages like this. Howard, I've just got to know, why did you do it? Linda, you really were both a lot alike. You all demolished me. Howard, you demolished yourself when you killed her. Linda, I didn't mean to.
So we had conclusive evidence that she did it.
Linda goes on to tell police that the fuse was lit the weekend her husband was out of town on a camping trip, and she found out he was having an affair.
On a whim, she decided she would drive to Van Buren, hoping that her mother might put her arms around her and say, everything's gonna be all right. You have a home here. I love your children. But that's not what she said.
Instead, Ruianne tore into the girl she had always considered a disappointment.
She told Linda she shouldn't have married that man anyway, and she shouldn't have had all those kids, and she berated her like she always had. Linda told me she snapped. She went into a rage. There was a gavel that had come off of a plaque that Sam Hugh had gotten when he left the U.S. prosecuting attorney's office. And it was just lying down on a table. And so Linda picked up that gavel.
And with a minimum of 10 deadly blows, she dispensed her own twisted justice. After that, Linda quietly slipped out of the house and drove back to Cabot, throwing the murder weapon out along the way. It's possible no one ever would have found out if she hadn't taken her husband's spare car to commit the crime.
He was such a control freak that when he got home from the camping trip, first thing he did was go and see if Linda had driven that car. And he saw the discrepancy in the mileage. So he put 2 and 2 together, and he harassed Linda until she finally admitted to him, "Yes, I did it."
Then, according to Anita Paddock's book Blind Rage, Howard sat on the information until it served him.
There was never a trial. The murder charge was dropped to second-degree murder, and she was sent to prison for 20 years with the possibility of parole.
Linda ultimately served less than a quarter of her 20-year sentence, paroled after 4 years. Crime Watch Daily reached out for an interview. She declined to speak with us at this time. But then, maybe she's already said enough.
It was a crime that, but for her husband calling and turning her in, would not have been solved to this day. And to this day, people have said Sam Hugh did it, and no, they didn't arrest him for it.
Anahita, as a defence attorney, you are very uniquely placed to give me an insight into this case. I know the job is to try and get the best deal for your client, but 4 years for killing someone, I mean, this is way worse than just a slap on the wrist.
I would have to agree with you on that one. Remember, she pleaded guilty to manslaughter and the judge sentenced her to 20 years. She only served 4 and they released her. So I'm assuming she either had a really good attorney or the parole board thought for whatever reason she was fit to be released back into society after only 4 years.
Well, now we want to ask what you think about this case. Was justice served in the case of Ruianne Park? Please tell us what you think at our Facebook page.